Today's webinar is on data analytics in internal audit. So really appreciate the large group of people attending today. I think this is really a really interesting and exciting topic, particularly if applied appropriately. Certainly something that's been emerging in the internal audit world. In other facets of finance and operations, we've seen data analytics and big data becoming more and more important as organizations execute on their strategies. And certainly from an internal audit perspective, I think it's important for all of you here that are investing some time to learn a little bit more about data analytics. Today, we've got actually several presenters today. I am Scott Sissel. I lead the internal audit services practice for the firm. Jason Olson will be joining me just in a few minutes, and we'll be talking about some more specific examples of data analytics and the applicability. Jason's a partner in our fraud and forensic services practice, and you may wonder why we have a fraud or forensics person speaking related to internal audit. My experience, and Jason and I have worked together on many internal audit projects, and our forensic group frankly has been probably out ahead of internal audit and has been using data analytics for a variety of audit roles, investigative roles, et cetera, for many, many years. And so he brings really a wealth of experience in this area. In addition, Josh Haynes will be jumping in a little bit later. Josh is a consultant in our technology consulting practice with a focus on data analytics. And he will be introducing several people who will provide some case studies around data analytics. And I'd ask you just to be flexible in your thinking when they go through these case studies. They may not specifically relate to a specific audit, but they present some kind of interesting studies in how data analytics can be used operationally or otherwise to really accelerate some of the work you're doing. So again, I'd just be mindful of that as they go through some of their particular information and studies, and that will come a bit later. Agenda for today, I'm going to give just a little background on internal audit, talk a little bit about some of the challenges. We'll get into the types of data analytics, some of the tools and challenges that are out there, and then also talk a little bit more about the value of data analytics and some case studies as we mentioned earlier. I always like to kind of kick off a session on internal audit, irrespective of the specifics, and just to reset with everyone the definition of internal auditing. I think it's important to look at the definition as prescribed by or as defined by an Institute of Internal Auditors, which states that it's an independent objective assurance and consulting activity designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. Later on in that second paragraph, it talks a little bit about the objective is to bring a systematic and disciplined approach to evaluate and improve risk management, control, and governance processes. And so I think as you think about this session, certainly we could talk all day long about risk management, but I really think data analytics can be a really key component of delivering on these particular objectives. Here is just a little bit more definition around the role of internal audit, again, focused on risk, controls, residual risk. And so there's definitely a significant component of internal audit activities that focus on risk and business risk. Again, we could talk a lot about risk assessment, and that's not what the session's about, but I think data analytics and data analysis can provide for a much deeper and less biased process for identifying risks or identifying potential issues than would be available if you were using some of the time-tested and traditional approaches to understanding risk and focusing your internal audit plan, which largely has been manually done via interviews and reviewing other documents. Data analysis can definitely provide a bit more depth to what's been done and again, potentially remove some of the bias. A couple of quick comments on the value of internal audit. I think all of you out there that are internal auditors should be proud of what you're doing. I think what you do helps management focus on strategy and helps them better identify and manage risk. You also can play a part in promoting ethics, improving operating efficiencies, reducing wasteful spending, and really providing some expertise to the organization. And I think it's important, again, to think about how you can use data analytics and data analysis to improve the effectiveness of what you're doing and improve the efficiency of what you're doing, and also maybe bring that to the rest of the organization to help them apply this to some of the things that they may be doing on a day-to-day basis. Just a brief definition of data analysis and auditing, and Jason will talk a little bit more about this particular topic, and really to set ourselves as we talk about this topic the rest of the session is data analysis and auditing is really the process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming, and modeling data with the objective of highlighting meaningful information, suggesting conclusions, and supporting decision-making. Really, I think utilizing these tools will help you move past the conventional approach to a more modernized technology-based approach that can improve the effectiveness of what you do and allow your function to become more data focused and maybe allow you to implement some continuous monitoring tools versus the traditional project by project efforts. As you dive into data analytics, there's really 4 different types of data analytics that are out there. Descriptive analytics, which is really using raw data summarized to describe what happened in the past. This allows us to learn a little bit more about past activity and behaviors and gain a view as to what might happen in the future. Diagnostic analytics is probably the next step, which is taking things from descriptive analysis and taking a step further. These type of tools are used to develop deeper insights and understand the cause and effect of why something happened. Predictive is really a next step in really utilizing some of the data and findings from both descriptive and diagnostic analytics to detect tendencies, clusters, or exceptions. And you can use this to better predict what is likely to happen in the future. And then finally, prescriptive analytics is something you may see organizations doing now to really use it to simulate and optimize the data, and which may allow you to suggest what action to take in the future. And certainly you see some of the more sophisticated digital companies using that in some of their business operations. I would suggest as you move forward, and what we'll probably talk about more so is really the first couple, descriptive and diagnostic analytics. And for all of you, I would suggest starting simpler and starting at that level and building over time as you build out your data analytics capabilities. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk a little bit further on data analytics.
Hey, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone attending today. The webinar, with Scott, when you mentioned adding value and really internal audit, adding value, really data analytics is going to be that way of really providing value to the organization. You're going to do that much more with the resources that you have in real time. For me, I've been doing forensic accounting, internal audit work for the last 17 plus years. And thankfully, data analytics has changed the way we operate, I think, as a whole in the industry. 17 years ago, a lot of spreadsheets, and you're trying to figure out how to get data into spreadsheets so you can do some sort of manipulation or analysis, right? Where you had to convert hard copy documents and try to make something of it in your analysis. And thankfully, technology's changed a lot, right? And now we can leverage technology to really extract that data, do the analysis or comparison for us so we can become more honed in our review of that information and how we interpret it. I think a little bit about data analytics, and I think about the alerts we get on our phones these days, from your credit card institution, right? Alerting about possible fraud, or at least an anomaly, right? And data analytics is no different. That the credit card company is probably farther ahead than most, but most organizations can implement data analytics in their daily living today. There's a lot of great resources out there, which Josh Haynes is going to talk a little bit about how you can leverage different technologies to make your life easier. And there are a lot of great technologies out there to really help with that real-time analysis. When we're talking about leveraging data analytics, we're talking about looking at a large data set, right? And testing that data set maybe against itself, against maybe key metrics. Maybe there's benchmark industry data that we're testing against. And how do we pull that data in to do that real-time analysis? Or how do we test, for example, on the payroll side, how do we test peer-to-peer comparisons, right? So you have certain type of employee types with tenure. How do we compare salaries? How do we compare hours worked, overtime? There's potentially a financial and an operational need for why you might look at that data. And there's plenty of ways to leverage different technologies to do that real-time analysis for you. And that makes you a better asset to the organization, helps the internal audit process and bringing more of those, what I'll call anomalies to light, so that they can be further investigated to the extent that they're necessary. And data really is the key component of risk assessment processes, right? We think of all the different data that's out there, and you probably hear the buzzwords about data warehouses and data lakes, right? Whereas a data warehouse might be, it's a gathering of all the data within an organization for a specific purpose, where it is in a very structured format, so it's relied on and can be used for real-time analysis. And that's really what most organizations are striving to become, right? Where they have their hands on the fingertips of all the data, and it's spitting back information that's valuable in a real-time manner. And certainly technology today is available where you can leverage that type of real-time analysis. And the other piece too, when you talk about leveraging data analytics, the days of sampling, we think of audit, whether it's internal audit or financial statement audit, the days of sampling, it's changing, right? For example, if we get a spreadsheet today of 1.2 million transactions, and in 10 years ago, you're probably sampling X number of transactions. Well, in today's world, with the access of that data and be able to compare it amongst other data sets, you can really skip the sampling and get into a more thorough review of that complete population, and allowing you to understand and interpret what that data represents. So when we talk about elevated risks and transactions and auditing, when we can look at the entire population, we're able to also prioritize based on what we perceive as our risks in our particular organization or in our industry. We can prioritize those risks, knowing that we can also leverage the technology and the data that we have access to. And we can do it faster, we can do it more efficiently. And again, it leads to better coverage from an audit perspective and process. One of the things I think about on the internal audit side, this may or may not be applicable to your particular situation, but we certainly have clients that have royalties, right? And oftentimes with royalties, there's a compliance piece to ensure that royalty payments are paid back in accordance with a particular agreement, and use those key metrics. Well, oftentimes that's always been housed in, there's an agreement, it states what the metrics are, and then there's some sort of manual process to corroborate what the royalty payment should be and versus what they actually were. And now we're able to house those key metrics, the data from the licensees, and really help identify whether or not the royalty payments that are being paid back are in alignment with what the agreement and the key metrics are. And those are just some of the ways in which you can leverage this type of data analytics technology. So, but when we're leveraging data technology or tech analytics, for us, whether it's on the internal audit or forensic side, it allows us to quickly identify those financial anomalies. They might be unusual, suspicious, fraudulent. It also helps us understand or identify those anomalies in a quicker manner, and helps us visualize a trend in the patterns of activity. It also allows us to automate the process, saving time, money, again, resources, right? And improving the operational efficiency, compliance, other initiatives that the organization may have from an internal audit perspective. And quite frankly, going back to, again, adding value, reputation within internal audit within your organization. I think the more that we can shed the light on trends as it relates to financial and operations, the more value we bring to the organization, and certainly become a more trusted advisor within your organization. And when we talk about leveraging data analytics for internal audit, there are a variety of sources of data that need to be considered. And this oftentimes is one of the challenging parts, right? First, you start off with the why. Why are we going to leverage data analytics? For what purpose? What value is it going to drive, right? But as part of that process, we're also thinking about, well, where is this data? What are the different sources? Who has access to the data? Who should have access to the data? Is it uniform? Is there uniformity across the data, or do we have to find a way to cleanse the data so that we can bring it all together in a data warehouse of sorts? And as we sit here and look at this particular slide, spreadsheets, right? We're thinking of exports from our accounting systems, ERP systems, CRM systems. We're very familiar and accustomed to structured data, right, that are found in databases. And we can understand, or at least visualize, how that data may come together, even though sometimes it might be even difficult when you get 50 spreadsheets and trying to figure out how you're going to handle 50 different spreadsheets and bring that data together. It can be done, of course, with technology, but I think we're more comfortable with the data found in databases, but there's other data out there that may need to be considered, right? So for example, data not found in databases. So what we refer to this as unstructured data. It might be within emails, it might be in invoices, it may be social media. There are other places to get data. You may or may not be familiar with the different searches that go on with even footnotes within financial statement audits, looking for certain key terms and words that may lead to discovery of some sort of anomalies or concerns within a financial statement. And so we're thinking about structured and unstructured data and bringing that information together, and not to mention other sources of data as well. And so here's a quick poll that was done by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners as far as asking what sources of data do organizations use in their anti-fraud data analytics initiatives. And we can say anti-fraud, or we can just say in their initiatives overall, right? Internal structured data. 3/4 of the organizations that responded said they use that data, which makes sense, right? That's your database technology. But then public records, maybe we're extracting data from industry data so we can compare our financial metrics and performance against the industry in real time. Could be law enforcement or other governmental type organizations. Internal unstructured data, so leveraging those emails, those invoices, data from all these unstructured sources. And so as you see, not many organizations are implementing that type of information in their data analytics, but that is the way of the future. So you have a better handle on the overall understanding of your data and what it's telling you, inclusive of social media and other third-party data. On the forensic side, we oftentimes do pull in industry benchmarking data to compare it against real client data. We're certainly comparing data, historical data over time, to look for unusual trends and patterns. At times it's looking into certain areas, for example, like payroll, where I mentioned that we test on a peer-to-peer comparison, look for anomalies. But there's so much more that we can leverage technology for, and we have all these different sources of data. And so it really is, where do you start? What's the purpose? How are we going to bring this data together, whether it be in a data warehouse of sorts, and how are we going to leverage analytics and technologies to meet our goals and objectives? With that being said, I think one of the best ways to really truly understand how this works is to go through live demonstrations. So I'm going to turn over to Josh Haynes and the team there to talk about the live demonstrations and walk you through exactly what it looks like.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jason. I'm going to get my screen up here, and I'm excited to present today. Some of you may have noticed I am wearing an Alteryx shirt, which is one of our favorite tools here at Eide daily to use. And so I'm a big fan of some of these analytics tools that we're going to be showing today. And as I go through these tools, just a reminder that there are lots of tools out there to use for analytics, but some of these are some of the industry leaders in their field. And after I introduce the tools, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to some of my coworkers and friends to give use cases of these tools in action. And so to start off, this is on your screen here, you can see Alteryx. And this is a data cleaning, data preparation, data automation tool that is really powerful. If you use Excel, you will want to use Alteryx. I can promise you that. And so just to kind of tell you what's going on here, up here on the top, we have some different tools that we can drag and drop onto the canvas. And these tools, you can kind of think of them as Excel functions that serve a specific purpose. And so what I'm going to do real quick is just show you kind of how it works. Here I have some Superstore or some data in an Excel sheet. I can click and drag right onto my canvas. I can select a sheet of that workbook, and there it is. Here's my input data tool. I can easily, quickly drag and drop a filter tool on here if I only want a subset of data. I can throw in a formula tool to create some custom calculations. And then there's a sample tool if you want a specific sample. But as Jason mentioned, with these kind of tools, we can do the whole population of your data. I have seen Alteryx handle millions of rows of data within seconds. I recently helped one of my coworkers. They had about 24 different Excel sheets, and each of them had at least two worksheets each with up to 1 million records. And so it was taking about 10 minutes to open that in Excel. We were able to work in Alteryx and get that down all into a simple process. And it takes seconds to run an analysis, and it really helped out with that work. And so Alteryx is a very powerful tool. Here's an example of a completed workflow. This is asset and liability reconciliations. It's a sample workflow that Alteryx provides. So you can see here some similar tools that I was using before. We have our data access right here. We have assets, liabilities, and those are coming from spreadsheets. And then here we have some audit data from a database. And so you can see kind of the flow of data as it moves through the Alteryx workflow. Here we're joining things together, kind of like a VLOOKUP in Excel. And then we're cleaning the data. We're adding or calculating total assets and total liabilities here. We're selecting fields and columns that we actually want. Here we're doing another VLOOKUP join. Here we're aggregating another calculation and filtering and then rejoining. So we can see that Alteryx lets you have a visual and an easy documentation of what you are doing to your data. If you were to think about an Excel process that you do today, you probably have a PDF or something that lists out steps that you need to follow every time you get that report. Let's say it's a monthly report that you need to get. And so you follow the Excel document. What if you make a mistake? You have to go back, start over, redo the whole thing. In Alteryx, you have all the steps laid out. And as you click through it, you can see the data down here, how it is changing and how it's being manipulated. And so Alteryx makes it really great to document and to create these tests of your data so you can make sure that you're hitting certain benchmarks or that data is coming in within certain thresholds. And this is fully automated. When you get a new monthly report, you simply come in here, hit run, and then in a few seconds you have your result. So it also saves on a lot of time. Another completed workflow I wanted to show real quick is this cash flow forecasting tool. And so this one, again, we have our data access of invoice and expense data. Here we are preparing the data, and then here we have income statement processing. And so what comes out of this workflow is an income statement. And again, this can be repeated however often you need, at whatever cadence you need. And then with those time savings, you can come over here to cash flow forecasting, and you can drag and drop some predictive models right into your data flow. And we're going to see more of how predictive analytics works in Alteryx later on. But yeah, so this is Alteryx. It's a very powerful tool. Again, like I mentioned, if you use Excel and sometimes you can't load your data or it just takes a long time, you will like Alteryx. I can promise you that. Another tool that we use is called Tableau. And this is Tableau's mission statement right here. Tableau helps people see and understand data. And Tableau does a great job of accomplishing this goal. If you want, you can go to Tableau Public. Simply Google search Tableau Public. And then what I did is I searched for Internal Audit within Tableau. As you can see, there are almost 10,000 visualizations and of people who have created Tableau dashboards or graphs and visuals that are specifically related to internal audit. And so this is a great place for you to spark some ideas of how you could use Tableau in your offering. And here's just an example that I found on Tableau Public, an internal expenses dashboard. And what this can do is you can click around in this dashboard and filter the different visuals to specify what you're actually looking at. So for example, individual employee expenses, I can simply click on their name and it'll take a little minute to load because this is on a public database, but it'll load up, and then the other visuals have been filtered down to that specific employee, and you can quickly make an assessment that this person has made a lot of other expenses. I wonder what that is. Let's investigate a little bit, see what's going on. And so Tableau does great, like I mentioned, at helping people see and understand data because you can start at a very high level and quickly drill into details from your dashboard. So that was a quick overview of Alteryx and Tableau, some of our favorites. And now I want to turn it over to a couple of our exchangers that we call them in Eide. Basically, these people came through a 3-month program and within data analytics and learned a little bit about analytics and learned Alteryx and Tableau. They got certified, and now they're going to show some use cases that they've been able to come up with that are specifically related to internal audits. So Tyler, I believe you're up first.
All right. So my name is Tyler Schmidt. I'm a manager in the forensic group. I work with Jason a lot. As Josh mentioned, I was one of the individuals who recently completed the 3-month exchange program. So the first May through July of this year, I spent 3 months working with Josh and learning about Alteryx and Tableau and using those tools and figuring out how to apply them. Previously, before that, had experience with Idea, but certainly found Alteryx to be a much more powerful tool than that. But the difference from Idea to Excel is still better than nothing. So as Josh was kind of mentioning, and Jason, the example that I have today is a way to analyze the full population of a data set rather than just taking a sample and relying on that. So here is a list of the files that were relied on. So there's 19 Excel files here, and in these 19 files, there are 99 tabs. So there are multiple tabs in each one, and they are all topping out at the old Excel limit of the 65,000 about number. So overall, there are 4.7 million journal entries contained within these files. And we're going to see some analyses that were performed over these files. So going back to it, purpose of analytics, as Jason mentioned, you can use the data analytics for financial analyses, and you can do it over the full journal entry rather than just the sample size. As many of you I'm sure know, Excel, that 1 million number is what Excel currently tops out at. So if we were to analyze all this data, we would have to be doing it in 5 different Excel books. And because of this workflow that was created in Tableau, or not Tableau, in Alteryx, this is going to be a repeatable process. Then the data can be uploaded to it, monthly or quarterly, whatever makes most sense for the client. And here is a example of the Alteryx workflow that was created for it. Over on the left sides, each one of those where the branch starts, that's a data inputs function that Josh was talking about. And then we kind of clean it up all the way until we get to this point here in the middle where there's a whole bunch of branches coming off of. And each branch there at the end is one of the tasks that were performed for this particular client. So running through the tests that we performed, the first thing we performed was we looked at journal entries that were recorded on weekends, Saturdays or Sundays. There were 724 results there, about 0.02% of the population. This concern is just something, not always a concern, and there might be a legitimate reason for it, but just starting off with simple red flags. People working outside of the Monday through Fridays, there's more of a chance of potentially not having a good reason to be there on a weekend. They might be doing something potentially questionable, And again, this 724 records is a lot easier to look at. Same thing, this particular data set has date recorded and date accepted. So, these first two tests, entries that are recorded on the weekends, entries that are accepted on the weekends, a lot of this stuff is automatically accepted. So that's why the weekends being accepted on are higher. But it again allows you to pare down the data, and all of this fits into one Excel book rather than the 5 books that we'd have to deal with before. Journal entries that are recorded on weekends, again, same concern. And this is based on an Excel list that was created of the state holidays that are observed. Same thing for accepted there. And then we also looked at the even dollar transactions that are divisible by $1,000. So, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 13,000, so on. Again, they may be perfectly legitimate, but these are just, some of the higher risk areas that we've seen from the forensic side of things. Again, since we have the accepted dates, we see what the lag was between the accepted. So we looked at ones that were accepted 14 days later, 30 days later, 60 days later, 180 days later, or a year later. Obviously, looking at the ones that were accepted more than 365 days later, you still have 2,000 journal entries that were delayed that long. Again, that might be something more on the operational side of things, but something for sure to potentially look at. And then the last ones that we did keyword searches. So we're looking for adjust, for potential adjustments to the entries, looking for transfers between accounts, especially, if they may be going to external locations, entries that were potentially voided, and entries that contain wire for like wire transfers. So here's a summary of everything that we just saw. So like I said, we looked at these 4.7 million journal entries, and those 14 tests that were run had 582,000 records of concern, almost 583,000. And the total time that took to run from start to finish, from inputting the data, cleaning it up, and running all 14 of those tests was 7 minutes and 5 seconds. So, the time savings there, obviously the investment on the front end of building the workflow, but going forward, these 14 tests, as long as the client still is exporting the data in these same reports, they don't change their accounting system, you're looking at 7 minutes to perform these same 14 tests year over year or quarterly or however often they want to be done. That is the end of mine. I'm not sure. I think we go to Drew next, potentially.
Hey, Tyler, this is Scott. I might mention 1 or 2 comments about what you brought up too, because obviously there's still a lot of data there, but what an organization could do with this data is you could then even narrow it even further into, particular individuals. You could, if you had the data, you could match up to those who are authorized to provide journal entries to see if there's, some unauthorized use, if there's a high propensity of particular type of entries or those even dollar entries at a particular time or month. And you're able to kind of take this data and really fine tune it even further to identify more unusual items that you might want to dig into versus, say, a traditional approach of taking a sample of journal entries and reviewing it and seeing what you find relative to it. So again, it's a great way to kind of accelerate the process of identifying issues.
Hey, Scott, I'll add one thing to that. We actually married key logs. So if you think about the keyless entry systems into buildings, that date and timestamp, the entering and exiting of employees, we've married that data to these same types of journal entry tests to just further pare down that data, for example, on the weekends or during the weekdays, what time of day, what time of night, by whom, that kind of thing. So the point is you can really pare down this data, marrying a whole bunch of sources of information to further get to the goal and objective of the original test.
Thanks, Tyler.
All right, so I guess I'll just start on my presentation now. All right, should be good to go. So, hey everyone, my name is Drew Burns, and thanks to Josh Haynes for inviting me. I'm excited to talk a little bit about the machine learning world and sort of dispel some mystery surrounding it. So, in the data analytics world, and I guess you could put machine learning under the umbrella term of AI, artificial intelligence, which is definitely a buzzword. But as I'm going to show you, this is a whole machine learning model from start to finish. And this is basically what AI is if you sum it down to, if you distill it down to its bare parts. So what are we doing here? So this is an Alteryx workflow. Like Josh was talking about, there's lots of different tabs up here, different tools. Right now we're working in the predictive tab up here. So there's lots of different models and ways to score your models, that sort of thing. So here we're working with a linear regression, which might not be a word that you've heard since high school, but that's really all we're doing here. So let me show you what data we're working with. So all this data is it's a sample data set of information from some sort of e-commerce website. So we have an order ID, we have the time spent on the site. Looks like that's in maybe seconds or milliseconds, not sure. We also have like the device type they use to access the website, the browser type, where they access the website, it looks like, their age, household income. So we have all of this data, and what we want to do with it is predict how much one of these customers would spend on the website. So this is our training data right here. So we have this person, for example, they spent 7,000 seconds on the website. They accessed through Chrome, accessed through Google AdSense, and they spent a total of $638, or maybe that's 638 cents. So we want to sort of predict the future on how much a customer will spend from a customer that we know nothing about. So if you look here, this is a data set where we don't know how much this customer spent. They access through Google AdSense, they're 19 years old, and they have an income of 30,000 a year. So we're trying to predict how much a person would spend based on these characteristics alone. And that's all machine learning really is we're using historical data to predict what's going to happen in the future, or at least a best guess. And there are ways to evaluate how well your model did, and we can get to that in a second. So we have this input data, and we feed it into this linear regression model. And right here in Alteryx, all we have to do is tell it what the target variable is, so what we're trying to predict. In this case, it's total order sales. And then we're also going to select the predictor variables. So in this case, we're going to pick display network, age, and household income. So we didn't use all of the data. Some of it isn't very useful for predictive analytics, but we're going to use these three attributes and see how well we can do in a prediction just based on those attributes alone. So here's one way to look in Alteryx at how well your model did. And this is sort of like, it's definitely a rabbit hole if you wanted to get really deep into machine learning. As you can see, there's endless ways of evaluating your models, but I just want to focus on this part right here with the min, first quartile, median. So we can see that about 50%, if I remember my statistics right, about 50% of the predictions fell within about $20, which is incredible if you think about, how little information that we gave the model. And you can see here that we're about plus or minus $100 off for all of them. So we're no more than $100 off. So what the end result is, let's see if, yeah, this is a good one. So this is the score that it predicted. So for this person right here who spent this amount of time on the website, who's this many years old, we predict that they will spend $636 on the website. and the actual was 638. So that one was only $2 off, which is incredible considering how little information we gave the model. So that's a very broad generalization of what machine learning is. Hopefully that dispels some of the mystery surrounding it. There's no sort of magic going on. Really, all machine learning is we're teaching a computer to read patterns from data that we might not be able to see as regular human beings. So we can, create endless charts with, looking for correlations between the device type here. But how are we going to correlate that with different browser types, for example, or different genders or different ages? So these are very endlessly complicated interactions and correlations that a computer would be able to detect fairly easily and within a couple of seconds. Like this model was built within about 10 seconds, if I remember right. So that's just a brief introduction to the power of machine learning. And that's something that we do at Eide Bailey a lot of the time. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, I wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit on what you introduced here, because you really could spend a lot of time digging into predictive analytics and machine learning. And the great thing about a tool such as Alteryx is that it puts that capability into the hands of business users. And so some of our exchangers or people who came through the internal analytics program, they had no technical experience beforehand. And by the end of the 3 months of learning Alteryx, they were able to create a predictive model to help a client understand where they should build their next store. And so it's crazy to me that within 3 months, something that used to take a PhD to understand, someone is able to create a model that can create some powerful predictions like that. So if you think about predictive analytics and internal audit, you can think, okay, how can we predict a certain outcome to occur based on historical data? And Alteryx is a great tool that will be able to get you to do that. So thank you, Drew, for showing us around there.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
Yep. And so I wanted to wrap up with one more example or case study, and then I'll turn it back over to Scott. I don't know how many of you have heard of GASB 87. It's a relatively new. I'm not entirely sure of all the things that go with it, but it's looking for lease information. And so we have a couple of clients who are coming to us asking for help. They have a lot of data, a lot of structured data, and they don't know. They need to be able to find where their lease information is within their millions of rows of transactional data. And so there's no good way to do it because it has not been tracked up to this point. And so what we've been able to do within Alteryx is I've been able to take their raw transaction data as well as some data that they've found of, okay, here's what a lease looks like. I've been able to join them together and create some analysis around there that outputs some results similar to what Tyler was showing of you put it through this little rules engine, and then it outputs the rows that kind of match that rules engine. And so I've been able to put it through. I've been able to search the transaction comments, meaning when a transaction comes through, maybe someone writes in, oh, this was a lease for a printer. And so I'm able to look at that free-form text, which is usually unstructured data, and I'm able to pull out the information of like, okay, it said lease, or maybe it's in the format of a lease, and I'm able to pull that out and then flag those rows that have that information in there. Similar to what Tyler did with flagging rows that had specific words in the fields. Another test I was able to run is comparing transaction amount with lease payment, because they track some leases and those repeat over time. And so I'd be able to compare historical transactions, and if they kind of line up, I'm able to flag those as well. And then also I'm able to flag transactions that are the same amount over and over again, meaning that maybe they pay every month or every year and it's the same exact amount. So that is indicative of a recurring lease, and therefore we should look at it. And so what I've been able to do with that data is I handed it over to our audit department, and now they are going through and shifting through a much smaller subset of data, and they're able to identify which ones are leases and which ones are not. And it's a really great solution for the client, because up to this point, they really have had really bad data management, and they haven't been able to find these leases. Drew and I have both worked on this project, and using Alteryx has really allowed us to create some quick value for the client. So that's just another use case of how you can use data analytics in internal audit or testing purposes. So
I might just add to what you said there. Josh doesn't come from the accounting side, and GASB 87 is for governmental entities lease accounting, and there's a FASB kind of similar standard. And the problem that's there is that multi-location entities are large, so a city or a county has multiple departments and multiple sub-entities, as a large health system or large manufacturing corporation could have. And the issue is whether they can identify all the leases that may be out there, or potential leases that maybe weren't necessarily tagged appropriately in their accounting records, and so they have to go through and make sure they get a complete list of them. So that's a great way to help compile things, and you can apply that to all kinds of data or situations or issues.
Yeah, exactly, Scott. Thanks. And the thing that I always I'll tell the exchanges when they first start the program is if you want to look out for if you're sending Excel documents back and forth, or if Excel takes forever to load, or if it crashes on you all the time. Those kind of use cases or pain points really are where you can really use analytics, and especially Alteryx and Tableau. These tools can come in and really make your life a lot better. So that concludes all of the demonstrations that we have for you today. If you have questions about what you've seen, please drop in the Q&A. But Scott, if you want to take over, that'd be great.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. Really, we just got a few more minutes here, and I just wanted to kind of pull things together a little bit. First of all, I did want to mention we are not a per se selling or pushing Alteryx or Tableau. It just happens to be two that we've used often. Josh, I know there's a variety of other tools that are out there. Tyler even mentioned Excel and Eide and some of those others that are out there that are available. Certainly one of the challenges that any organization has in implementing a data analytics process and program is having the right tools and training around them. So there's certainly a variety of tools that could be used, and that you could look at from the standpoint of building a data analytics program. Secondly, I guess just maybe to take off of some of the examples that have been given, some other maybe real life examples of things we've done in internal audit. And here are some areas that we think are just really ripe for use of data analytics when you're doing audit routines. General ledger was talked about. On the revenue side, we really just completed some work where there was some questions about the billing process, timeliness, how long it took to get bills out, how long to collect them. And this was in a service organization, a healthcare organization. And so there's some question about when was the procedure initially ordered, how long before the procedure occurred, how long from occurrence to when it was billed, how long from when it was billed to collected, or has it been collected? And we were able to dive into both their GL system and their receivable revenue management system, and really build some data analytics tool that was able to allow us to build out a chart of those lag times between all those separate items I just mentioned over a course of a 2-year period. And we were also able to dive into the type of procedures per se, or the type of particular provider involved, because that could be a problem. And we are also able to look at kind of credits and that sort of thing, if there was a higher propensity of credits during a particular time frame. Initially, we started this going, well, are we going to just dive in and start testing a bunch of billings? And we did do some of that, but for the most part, we stepped back and said, well, really, we want to identify breakdowns in the process And we were also able to see kind of who's involved in it, who's reviewing and approving, and able to identify some real gaps at times. And we're able to identify some opportunities, but also we're able to identify when things improved, you know, and some trends that were positive and certain areas that were doing a good job, and kind of apply those to the other area in order to accelerate the billing process. So again, that was one area we thought was really interesting. I have inventory management and supply chain, and I think in many industries right now, there's concerns about the supply chain and access to goods and on a timely basis. And certainly another area that's you know, outside of maybe the traditional review and approval, but also looking at order backlog, how long from order to delivery, is there quality questions, those sort of things. So I think that's another area really to, you know, that can, the data analytics can really add value to the organization. And once you start building out some of this stuff, whether it be revenue, whether it be expenses, looking at anomalies and expense side of things, you can really kind of build a continuous process of looking at these things on a routine and regular basis to identify whether there's some deterioration or some trends that appear unusual. And that's kind of working with your management and your finance team to build those out. And again, probably a way you can really add a lot of value and show your value. And as some of the people mentioned here, once you've got those models built, you can really execute on them fairly quickly and in much less time. And particularly given every organization, internal audit is time challenge, is resource challenge. I think it's a opportunity for you to use limited resources effectively and efficiently. This is just a couple other operational audit topics that we've seen in application. One I'll point out too was where we did a little work around contractors and identifying when an organization is using more or less contractors and who is using them, meaning who, which department, who's approving those, and when those contracting costs increase or decrease. The other piece is certain contractors may have, like a maintenance contract, may have, the contractor may have obligations to be performing maintenance on certain equipment at a particular point in time. There is a potential ability, depending on what the system has, to monitor that service level and ensuring that these technology-based equipment are being maintained in accordance with whatever the contractual relationship is. So again, really kind of moving out a little farther in the audit side into some operational areas, but some things that these tools can help help an organization and help your internal audit function add value to the organization. With that, we've got a minute or two. I'd like to open up to questions from anyone.
Hey, Scott, the one thing I'll add to this too, I think, you know, with any timely discussion, I think you almost have to include cyber these days, cybersecurity. And, you know, cybersecurity really is data analytics, whether it's capturing data from endpoints like the workplace devices that we're accustomed to working with, the workstations, laptops, desktops, to the network servers themselves and cloud computing. There's so many logs that are captured, and you need log aggregation and analytics around that. And cybersecurity really is data analytics. And so that's just another area that, you know, I think is everyone's problem when I think about cybersecurity, because everyone needs to be involved in that process. And in internal audit's no different. There are data tools out there to monitor for anomalies within whether it be email to network servers to the endpoints. And that's just one other application of data analytics that's really important these days, especially with the amount of ransomware that's going on in the world.
But no, good point, Jason. Appreciate that. And you're right. That's I think every audit plan or risk-based plan has cyber on it, and in this day and age, and there's a whole another topic around that area as well. So with that, I'll open up to questions. If anyone wants to hop on and add a question, or throw something in the chat. I don't see anything coming in. So Amy, I think we're probably ready to wrap it up here, maybe just a minute early.
All right. Well, I don't see any questions, but please feel free to reach out to us. We can answer your questions via email. And if you'd like to call, you can always call, but email is probably the best option right now. And we do thank you so much for attending. Thank you to all of our presenters, and we hope everyone has a great day. We'll see you guys next time.